All right, hey everybody, welcome back to Chapter 4. It has been a while since we have last been working with FileMaker here. A couple of quick housekeeping things. This is kind of a continuation of what we did in Chapters 1 and 2. I've realized that I've made this probably as confusing as possible by putting that Chapter 3 in there. The reason I did that is because I didn't know where I was going with this entire series. So after this chapter is done, I'm going to go back through and reorganize and relabel things a little bit so it's not quite as confusing as it is right now. So prerequisites for this, it would be great if you watch Chapter 1 and 2. The only thing you really need is kind of a working understanding of some of the structures we've already set up in FileMaker. So even if you haven't done those lessons yet, if you've watched them, you have an idea, you're going to be okay today. And then you also want to make sure you have downloaded and installed the MBS, the Monkey Bread software plugins for FileMaker. You can find the link to download those at the link down in the description of this video. And if you need more of a step-by-step guide on how to install them, you can go back to somewhere in Chapter 1 and 2, and I'll put a card on this video afterwards. The one where we linked EOS to FileMaker that had instructions on how to do it. So that's really the only prerequisites for this. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So on my screen here, I have where we left off at the end of session 3. So I've got, here's our work notes database, and then I also have the MBS plugin folder open and ready to go. What I like to do first, whenever I'm trying to figure out how to implement one of the MBS plugins into my own solution, is we look at these awesome example files that they have made for us, and that's what we're going to do today. One important thing to note is that if you are looking at these example files, you need to copy them out of the disk image that you downloaded, so you need to put them on the actual hard drive of your computer, or else you won't be able to modify anything in them, because the disk image is read-only. So here it is, it's the MBS plugins. I happen to have version 103, whatever the version you have, it's probably going to be the same. And I think the only other thing to point out before we really jump in is I am working on a Mac today. According to MBS, all of these plugins the plugins we will be using and the functions we will use today should work cross-platform between Mac and Windows. If for some reason you run into an issue on a Windows machine today, put it in the chat. I can't promise that I'll be able to fix it live because I don't have a Windows machine open and available to fix those things right away, but I will look into it and I will get back to you to get it fixed. Okay, anyway, let's really get started here. So I have just a Finder window open here that I'm going to drag the examples that I need into. So the two examples that we are going to be using in this series are the AV Recorder examples. So I'm going to just drag AV Recorder over onto my computer. And then not today, but for next week, we're going to be using the Graphics Magic examples. So I'm going to take Graphics Magic and drag those in as well. Again, not going to use the Graphics Magic today, but while we're here, we might as well drag them in so that we have them ready to go. And then I'm just going to close that disk image. And the first thing I want to do is start examining these demo files that are in the AV Recorder folder. So you'll see there are 3 different demo files. We actually don't care about this iOS test one. I'm going to delete that. The things that we are interested in today are the AV Recorder devices and then AV Recorder. So let's start with AV Recorder devices. You probably get this little pop-up every once in a while if you haven't paid for for the MBS plugins. That's fine. You can just click OK. And right away, as we scroll through this, you're going to see that there are individual records made automatically for us of every audio and every video device that is currently connected to your computer. If for some reason you don't see that, you can click this Update List button and it should find those. Again, if you working on a Mac, so this is all super simple. Don't know how it works on Windows. Hopefully it was that simple. And of course, right away we say, okay, this is pretty much every device. I have a lot of different devices connected to my computer because in the last year I've experimented with all different kinds of video capture device for these streams and for all the Zoom calls and everything else we've been doing. I don't care about the audio devices today, so not super important, but I do care about the video devices. So first thing I want to do as I'm starting to examine this file is look at the database structure, so Command-Shift-D for that, just to kind of figure out how they have this set up. And we see this is a pretty simple demo file. There's a single table, and there are 11 fields here. So really nothing that much to it. Pretty easy, pretty simple to figure out. I'll look at maybe our scripts then. So Command-Shift-S, we'll see what scripts are in there. And there's only 2 scripts inside of it. So again, a really simple demo file. This is the script that I care about first, this update script. This update devices script. And if we start to examine it a little bit, we see 2 things. We see the first half here is all finding your audio devices, which again we don't care about. And then the second one is finding your video devices. And so then basically what it's doing is it's going through and it's initializing a session within the MBS plugin. So it's going to say, okay, let me go ahead and look for these devices. And then it's going device by device and setting those table fields that we just looked at with various information about that particular device. So for example, ID, it's going to go in and it's going to find the system ID of that device. The name, it's going to find the name of that device. And as you start to kind of look through these records, you see how that works. The things that we care about for our purposes for today are the name of the device and the index of the device. Those are really the only things that I care about. You know, you can transport type, it'll be PCI or USB or whatever the interface might be. You can have the manufacturer, you can have all that kind of stuff, but really all I care about is the device name and the index. Device name for me as a human to be able to figure out what device I'm talking about, and then the index for the computer to be able to specify which one of my devices I'm going to then use to capture my photos with. Okay. So that makes sense. I'm going to keep this kind of open in the background, and I'm going to look at the other demo file here for a second, this AV Recorder demo. So the AV Recorder demo, this is the file that actually sets a video device, sets an audio device. It actually will allow us to record a movie, which we are not going to do today, or it'll allow us to take a picture, which is what we are going to do today. So we can examine this a little bit. We'll go here. Looks again like a single table. This is even simpler. There's a single table with 3 fields, an image container, a session number, and a file path. We can look at the scripts. Scripts in this one are a little bit more complex, but when we start looking at them, they're all pretty simple. We have a script that initializes the plugin to do what we want it to do. We have scripts that set our audio and video devices. These 2 we're going to ignore because, again, those are for video recording. We have a shutdown script that releases the camera, releases the session. We have a script that starts a preview for us, and there's 2 different options. You can see one of them is disabled by default. We'll examine those later on today. And then finally, a very simple script to take a picture. And you can see like all there is to this take a picture script is, you know, we're setting this container field with the contents of whatever our camera is currently seeing. So this seems like it's really complex, but as we dive into it, you're going to see this is actually pretty simple. Pretty magical, really, how easy the MBS folks have made this to do. Okay, so just a quick little demo with here. So by default, let's look, when we click this set video device, it's going to run this set video device script. And right away we see, okay, set variable. And if you remember from our earlier lessons, the variable, the local variable R is how FileMaker sends things to MBS. So you can't really use this for other things. It's good to, I reserve $R or local variable R to be just related to MBS. And exactly what it's expecting, you can find this on the MBS website. It has a full library of exactly all of the various functions and everything you can call using it. So essentially what this is doing is it's saying set the video device to this index. And you see index 0 is hard-coded into this script. We could come back over here and we could get the various index numbers of our various devices and just update this script. So 0 for me is my built-in webcam on the iMac here. So when I run this script, it's okay, FaceTime camera built in. And when I start a preview, here I am. So this is actually a preview within FileMaker using that device 0. So pretty cool. And I'll run the shutdown script really quick, and that should kill it. I find that when you're testing, even if you have multiple cameras attached to your Mac, it's a really good idea to use the built-in webcam for your testing purposes. And the reason for that is because you have that little green status light on on your Mac. It will let you know when the camera is currently being used and when it's not. And as we get into these scripts a little bit more, you'll see why that shutdown, while that disconnect script is important, because otherwise FileMaker or MBS will keep your camera open in the background, and it can take up system resources and just cause issues down the road for you. So great if you have a camera that will show you that light if it's being used. It's a really excellent way to test things. So let's do that again. Let's look at my where is my GoPro? Not that one. Camlink 4K. So my Camlink 4K is index 7. So if I come back over here into my set video device and I change this from a 0 to a 7 and save it. Now within this demo thing, why didn't that work? Not important for now. We'll get it working in a second here. Okay, so the reason this is important, I should have said this first. We're going to be importing both of these functions into our own FileMaker solutions. The reason for that is because we first want to be able to figure out what devices we have attached, then we want to be able to set which device we want to use, and then we want to be able to take the picture. So this AV recorder is the one that actually takes the picture and sets the device, and this AV recorder devices is how we actually get our device list. Okay, makes sense? And if it doesn't, hopefully it will start to make a little bit more sense as we go. So I'm going to close the AV recorder for now, and we're going to start out with just this AV recorder devices. I'm going to come back over here to my existing solution. And the first thing I'm going to want to do is add a new table to this solution. So I'm going to want to make a table that matches this one over here, where I can populate all those various devices into. So within my existing solution, I'm going to do Command-Shift-D or File Manage Database, and I'm going to create myself a new table called let's just call this AV Devices. Create. Now when I double click on it, I'm going to create some fields. For this particular, the cat is now on my desk, stand by. For this particular table, we don't need any of these existing fields, so I'm just going to delete all of those. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add all of the fields that were in my demo solution back over here. And I made a little screenshot of this just to make it easier. Because unfortunately, you can't, once this database manager is open, you can't go back and forth and open up another one to see the other fields. It's kind of annoying, but it is what it is. So I'm just going to go down this list real quick. Index, ID, name, description, manufacturer, model ID, transport type, connected, in use by another application, suspended, and type. So I've made the same ones that were in this. What we're going to find, again, is that we don't necessarily need all of these, but for demo's sake, I'm going to go ahead and just put them all in there for now. Other thing about this is this particular table doesn't need to have a relationship to anything else. It can just exist by itself. We don't have to define any relationships because none of this really is related to anything else that we have going on in our show so far. Of course, we have all of our instrument relationships to all these things, but this is really a table that doesn't need a relationship. So great. So I'm going to do all those, just make them simple text fields, click OK. And then, of course, what it's done for me is it's created a table, or excuse me, a layout in the background that I can work with those things on. It's kind of ugly. I'm not going to really want to use that for now. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm just going to make a duplicate of this admin layout and then put the fields that I want in it. So do that, Command-Shift-L for my layout manager or File Manage Layouts. And I'm going to duplicate the admin layout. I'm going to call this AV Devices. And then I'm going to make sure that it is associated with that AV Devices table. Great. Done that. Now I'm going to open it. I'm going to close my other one just so I don't have the wrong thing. And you can see right away, of course, these are not related, the fields we had in there before, so we're going to edit this and get rid of all that and make it look the way we want. So to go back into editing mode, that's Command L, or what is it, view layout mode. I'm going to delete all these existing things. And really all this has done for us is it's brought in a layout that looks similar to the other ones and has the similar styles embedded and stuff like that. So it makes it a little bit easier. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag some of these fields in. So the first thing I want, we said is important, is my index. And then what else after that? Maybe ID, the name, manufacturer, and maybe name and manufacturer are both useful, you know. Type, again, we're only going to have video, but it's nice to see. And then maybe connected status. I'm going to leave it like that for now. I'm not going to worry about any of these other ones. And then because we want to view this as a list, I'm going to format this similar to how we formatted our lighting paperwork before, where I'm going to make a row of the actual fields like this. Couple questions here as I'm doing this. Can you import the table from the other file? You can import. I personally, unless it's a really complicated table, like eventually some of the lessons I want to do here get way more complicated than this, and in those we'll go over actually importing things from solution to solution. I find that as you're going through and kind of learning how to do it for the first time, that it's useful to rebuild it when it's this simple, because it can give you a better understanding of exactly how things work and how they're laid out. And I have made a couple of little gotchas in this as well, so that's why I'm not importing directly. Other question, does FileMaker have a student discount? I do not believe that FileMaker has a student discount, but they do often do buy one, get one sales. In the grand scheme of pieces of software, FileMaker is actually pretty affordable. I don't remember what the cost right now is, but I know that like I only pay, I think it's maybe $150 a year or something like that to keep the subscription up to date. And that's only because I'm running some stuff on a server and things like that where I want those features. You know, I think pretty much everything I've done in my sessions so far, you can do back to like FileMaker 16 or something like that. So, you know, it's a relatively low cost software in the grand scheme of things. Okay. So anyway, so yeah, buy one, get one free. I think they might be doing that right now, or that they just did one. And I've had that happen for, you know, people can, you know, find a friend to go in with you on it, and there you go. Okay, so I've laid these fields out, I center align them, and then I'm going to drag my body to be just the size of a single row. And now I have a pretty simple AV devices layout. When I go back into browse mode by hitting Command B, you see there's no records or anything there yet. I want to make sure then as well, we talked about this several times in previous lessons, but you can switch between different views. So you've got a form view where it's a single record, a list view where if you had multiple records they would all show up, or a table view. So I'm going to keep this in list view, and if you go back into the layout editor and you go right click and then do layout setup, you can limit it to only ever show up in one view. So for this particular case, I only want it to be a list. I never want to see one at a time. Okay, so now we have this. If I click new record, you see I've got this in here. Now I need to work on bringing in the script from my demo solution to go ahead and populate this solution with my devices. So I'm going to go ahead, and I don't need this anymore. I've got this, so I'm going to open up my script editor by doing Command-Shift-S. And the cool part about this is something that I'm not going to go through line by line and retype every line of this script. I can copy paste these script steps from one instance of the script editor into another. So first thing I want to do is I want to look and see here, what of this demo script do I not need? I need this initialization. I don't need audio. So where does that end? Ends all the way here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just delete. I'm going to highlight all of those by clicking one, holding down Shift and clicking another. I'm going to hit my delete button and get rid of all those steps because I don't need them. I need this. I need pretty much everything that's under the video. Yeah, and then at the end I want to release the session. So yeah, so I've taken this down to 30 lines. So before I copy it, I'm going to open up my script editor for my my solution. And you guessed it, I'm going to make a new folder. This is going to be called AV Capture. Yeah, Adam just said in the comments he paid $540 for his license. Yeah, I think that's about what I paid a long time ago. I think now with their licensing model, I could be wrong about this, but I think you get server and pro at the same, like it's all part of the same bundle, but I don't know that for sure. But $540 might be a lot, but if they're doing a buy one get one and you can get a friend to go in, then you're talking $220 for this piece of software, which is really, really good. Okay, so I've made this AV Capture Scripts folder, and now I'm going to make a new script, and I'm going to call it Get Devices. Okay, so now I'm going to come in here, I'm going to highlight all of these, copy them, Command-C, and then here I'm going to paste. And right away, we notice a problem. Table missing, table missing, table missing. This is one of those little gotchas I set up. So this is something you want to pay attention to when you are pulling in things from a demo file. The reason that it says table missing is because the table in the demo file was named something completely different. It was AV Recorder Devices. And we named ours, what did we name? We named it AV Devices. So instead of going in and relinking every single one of these script steps back to that table, the easier thing to do would be go ahead and delete these again. Rename my table, AV Devices, to be, I forgot what it was already, AV Recorder Devices. So again, matches perfectly. Change that. And it automatically updates anything that it needs to in the background in terms of fields and linking and everything else like these. You see it's already, if I come in here and I double click on this, it's linked to the right table. It does that all in the background for me, which is great. And now, if I copy all that and I paste it, look at that. Everything works just fine. And then the cool part about this too is once I've saved this script, let's say I didn't want this to be the name of my table, I could go in and relabel this table name again. So let's say I want to change this back to just AV Devices. And now FileMaker in the background knows that that's what it's done, and it's automatically updated this for you. So just the takeaway from there is pay attention to the order of operations. When you're doing that initial back and forth, it behooves you to name your tables exactly the same as the way that the demo files do, but once you get it in there, you can change it to your heart's content to match whatever your whatever nomenclature or naming that you use in your solution. Okay, so we've got this script in here. It works pretty well. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add just a button on this layout to run this script. So I'm going to go back into my layout editor, Command L, and use my button tool up here at the top. And I'm going to say Get Devices, and then the action for that button is going to be Perform Script, and I'm going to choose that Get Devices script that I just did. I don't have any script parameters for it. So that button is there. I'm not going to worry about making it pretty today. That's on your time. Go back into browse mode, and fingers crossed when I click this button, there you go. Of course, again, I got this pop-up will pop up every once in a while. You can just click OK. And right away, I've got some pretty useful information about the video devices that are attached to my system. Again, the things I really care about are the index and the name, but you might find this other stuff useful. Excuse me. So the next thing I want to do is I want to make this a little bit better to read and maybe add a little bit of color coding to some things. For example, the connected column. It's basically a true/false. It's a Boolean field. It's going to say yes, I'm connected. That's a 1, or no, I'm not connected. That's a 2. So that would be. I actually not sure. I haven't tested. Maybe I could unplug one of my cameras and see, but I'm worried that would crash OBS and everything would fall apart. But I haven't actually ever seen it be a 0 for the connected, because I would think that if it's not connected, it wouldn't show up as a device. I don't know. Anyway, so let's go back into our layout editor here. And instead of this connected field, I'm just going to delete that altogether, and I'm going to put a button there. The reason I'm going to use a button is because I want to do some conditional formatting. And unfortunately, and this might change hopefully soon, but doing like layout objects like boxes and stuff, you can't actually do any conditional formatting for, which is really annoying. But a button you can. And of course, the button doesn't actually have to do anything. So this is literally just going to be an empty button, but I'm going to set up some conditional formatting where if, let's say, connected equals 1, then I want it to be green. And if connected, I'm going to say does not, you could say equals 0 or does not equal 1. Either way, I guess is technically correct. Unless there's, the doing not equals 1 is useful if there's other statuses, but as far as I know, it's only going to be a 1 or 0, a true or false here. And I'm going to make that red. Right? So now because that little button is within the individual record, row record here of my device, when I go back to this, they're all going to show up as green. Quick little easy way to add some color coding to it. Other things I notice here, this ID, this is like a system ID. I don't really need this field. I'm going to leave it there. Maybe I come in and maybe I just swap the locations of these two. Maybe I put, maybe I move so the name is next to the index so it's easy to find. Type is, again, always going to be video. I haven't done anything with audio recording here. Maybe you can make your own little stamp solution with it. I don't know that I would recommend that. I don't know that it's designed quite to be that that intense, but in theory it could work. Or you can maybe get creative with voice memos or something like that. Okay, so this makes a little bit more sense now. Index, name, manufacturer, other information not as important. Okay, so what's the next step in our development process here? Our next step is going to be to decide, to tell FileMaker, to tell MBS which one of these devices I want to be my selected video device. Really, the only two of these that I have working right now are my CamLink and my FaceTime camera, but you see there's all kinds of options there. So I'm going to come back over here to this AV recorder devices. There's nothing else that I need in this demo file, so I'm going to close it just to get it off my screen. And now I'm going to open up my AV recorder demo file because this one has the stuff that I need next. And I'm going to open up my scripts for that. And I'm going to examine a couple of things here. I'm going to examine this initialization script as well as this set audio device, or excuse me, set video device script. I guess I should go ahead and delete the ones we're not using just to make it a little simpler to follow. Okay, so these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that we're using. So set video device is the most important thing for us right now. And of course, this started out with a 0, I believe. Great. Okay. Excuse me. Devices, set selected device. Okay, so the next script we're going to make is going to be our set selected device script. So I'm going to do new script. I'm going to say set selected device. Where this could come in handy too is if you're doing a show, we're specifically going to be doing this for focus photos over the next couple weeks. But let's say you had focus photos and you wanted to do, maybe a backstage shot. I don't know, whatever video feeds you can get into your computer, you can capture photos from. So you could, in theory, capture from multiple ones in the same session. That'd be kind of cool. Okay, so all we are really going to do is say, oops, set variable, nope, set variable, and we're going to keep this selected index number as a global variable in our file. So as you start to look through the demo files, you'll notice that they use some global fields, they use some other fields. I'm using global variables for this. It's just a slightly different way to store that data. And it's a slightly new thing that I don't think we've really gone over a lot in these sessions. So I figured it would be kind of a new and interesting thing to look at. So setting this variable, I'm going to call it AV selected device. And again, for a global variable, $2 local or 1. As a refresher, a local variable is used only in the immediate script versus a global variable which will get stored and will persist until you close FileMaker, and then it won't come back again until you run whatever script it is that stores it. And now for what that is, excuse me, we want to set this to the index field of a particular row. So it's as simple as that, AV devices index. Okay. So setting variable, global variable, selected device as the AV devices index. Now what we want to do with this is create a button over here on our layout that will set that device as that will call that script and set that device as our selected device. I guess I should probably make a little more space here. Sorry, I went off my script a little bit and I feel like I got confusing there for a second. So I will come back here. Okay, so select, and of course I want that button to perform script, set selected device. Now you might be asking, it's only a single line. Why not make the button just do that single thing? There are reasons, and I will show you that as we get a little bit deeper in here. Because as you might imagine, there are other things that I'm going to want to add to my to that particular script. Okay, so now I have a select button for all of these. Before I click one, I'm going to go to Tools, Data Viewer. And in my data viewer here, if you don't have this, you want to make sure that you are, oh gosh, where is it? Oh yeah, right here. So if you don't have a Tools Data Viewer menu, then you want to go to FileMaker Pro Preferences and make sure that the Used Advanced Tools checkbox is checked. You might have to restart FileMaker after that. So you notice right away in our data viewer, we do already have a global variable system platform. I think we defined this early on as a way to figure out how particular things were saved. I don't really remember. But now when I click this button, look at that. We've added a new one, selected device 0. And let's say I want to do the cam link right there. Now it's selected device 7. So that's really cool, but other than having this data viewer open, how do I know what my currently selected device is? We can do that with some conditional formatting. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to conditionally format this select button. Let me open up my demo here, make sure I do this right so I don't just confuse people. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to say, conditional formatting, add a new rule, and I'm going to say if index, again, this is going to be referencing the index of this particular record, if the index equals this AV selected device, AV selected device. Again, capitalization does not matter in these, but just try to be consistent so it's not as confusing. So if it is the selected device, then I want to fill it with green. And I'll probably want to make the text color white because black on dark green doesn't really work. And then, of course, I want a kind of an otherwise as well. Fortunately, there is no otherwise. You kind of just have to specify it. So I'm going to say if index does not equal AV selected device, then I want it to be, let's just say, maybe gray and text color black. It is important to define both of those things because I've found that sometimes things can persist in weird ways. So just define both of the things that you want. So first one here, if the index of that particular record equals the selected index, it's going to be green. Let me make this a little bit more green so we can really see it. If it's not, it's going to be gray. Okay. So now I go back into browse mode here. Oh, look at that right away. It's working. But wait a second. I just clicked on the other one and now they're both green. That's really annoying. And you say, oh, okay, it's kind of going away, but it's not doing a great job of refreshing that. And what I found in my testing is this is the case on some systems and other ones not. Like I just hovered over it and it went away. So the quick way to always make sure that it's going to update is back here in our selected device script. I'm just going to add one more step that is refresh window. It's going to run in the background. It's just going to update things. So now whatever device we have selected is going to automatically be green. You could probably get creative in there if you wanted to. You could do a variable and say selected and not selected and change the button text. I'm not going to get into that today, but you could use the lessons we learned back when we were making our toolbars before to do that. But here we are. Okay, so we've got our selected devices working. What is next? Index number of each device. Joel, that's an excellent question. So Joel had a question, does the index number of each device change as devices get connected and disconnected? I am not 100% sure. That is a good thing to experiment with, and I would encourage you to experiment with that. I don't want to do it right now because, again, I don't want to really mess with my system devices and run the risk of OBS crashing and then the stream dying. So I don't know for sure, but I will research that and find out and comment here, or you guys can do it now and see what happens. I have found with Apple devices, index 0 is pretty much always this FaceTime camera, unless you don't have a FaceTime camera, obviously. Okay, so I'm just gonna say my selected device is 0 for now. And the next thing we want to do, we did that, we did conditional formatting, talked about the variables. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is add a preview. Similar to this one, we set the device and we were able to start a preview. I'm going to do the same thing over here in our file. I'm going to just move this data watcher off to the side for now. And let's look at our demo file and see what's in this start preview. Oh, you know what I did forget? If you are running a Mac, you might have already seen a warning pop up, a system warning saying, macOS FileMaker is requesting permissions to utilize the camera or whatever it might say. In our demo script for the initialization here, there is this little if-then statement that we need to copy in. So it basically says if we're running macOS, it's going to check to see if you've already authorized it, and if it hasn't, it's going to ask you to authorize it. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to put this into my set selected devices script, so it runs very early on in the process. That way, in the heat of the moment, you could do it when you go to capture videos, but I find that it's easier to do it here. So you have your whole crew sitting down ready to capture those photos, and then you have to go in and update all your system preferences. So I'm just copy pasting this into this set selected devices script. Chances are you won't see anything, especially if you've already played around with this a little bit, but that's that. Okay, so back to previews. So looking at this preview demo script, we have a couple of things that we look at here. We've got this add preview to window, add preview with control, and start preview. So what I'm going to do in ours is I'm going to make a preview that pops up in a separate window. You can play around with the inline functions of this. I particularly don't like them. I like having a separate preview window because then I know for sure that my camera is active, and you'll see a little bit why I like that as we get in there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my layout manager. I'm going to make a new layout that is just a form, and I'm going to call this video, or let's call it camera preview. I'm going to open it, and then this layout is going to have absolutely nothing on it, and I'm actually going to make it relatively small. I'm just going to make it like a small little window here, and I'm going to get rid of this top section. I'm going to go to Part Setup. I'm going to get rid of the top navigation. So it's literally just a white square. The other thing that's important to do is to click on your body itself, and then within the attributes for that, within the styling attributes, you want to make sure there's no fill. Because it will put the window behind whatever the body part is. So really all I'm doing is creating a completely empty layout, relatively small, no fills, no anything, just like that. And that's all there is to that layout. I'm going to go back to browse mode here, and we'll go back over to our AV devices. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is go ahead and make our own start preview script. So I'm going to make a new script here in this folder, and we're going to call this start preview. And first step is going to be to open up that window, layout that we just made in a new window. So this is going to be new window. Now, I think pretty much everybody who's doing these is using a relatively new version of FileMaker. If you're, I think, earlier than 16, you have to do this as 2 separate steps. You'd have to do a new window and then a go to layout. I think in FileMaker 16, you're able to, that's when this whole specify a specific layout started. I'm going to call this Cam Preview. It's going to be the title. And I'm going to say go to layout, Cam Preview. And I'm going to just give it some dimensions here. You can play with these as you start to go through it a little bit more. Height, 580. Width for me, I'll do, let's say 740. And then position from top, this is going to be where the window appears in relation to the very top left corner of your window. So just to offset it a little bit, I'm going to say 50 by 50 so it kind of pops in a little bit. And I'm going to disable just about every control on it other than the close. All I want to be able to do is close it. All this window is going to be doing for me is being a preview for my camera. So new window, boom. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to set a couple of variables that we're going to use later on. I'm going to say set variable height. This is a local variable. And the value for that, this is going to be a new get function for us. So I'm going to start typing get. And it's going to be window height. So what that's going to do is it's going to go to that new window, and then it's going to set this local variable as our window height, which of course in this particular case is 580. If you want to hard code all those things in, you can, but you'll see in a second why it's valuable to do it the way I'm doing it. Height, and I'll do one for width. And you guessed it, it's get window width. Great. And a little more white space, again, just to help organize things. The next thing we need to do is actually initialize an MBS AV recorder session. So to do that, I'm going to say set variable. This is going to be a global variable called AVSession. And it's going to be MBS. And the function we are going to call is called AV recorder init for initialize. Okay, so what that does is it basically everything else we're going to do from here on in is going to refer to a specific session number that MBS starts for us. It's going to randomly generate that number. You see in our demo file, it's over here. It actually is a field. I'm using it as a variable. Again, you can use it either way. But everything that we do from here on in is going to reference that very specific session number. So in the background, MBS will bind our selected video device to that specific session number, and then use that to determine a whole bunch of things that you'll see as we get a little bit deeper into this. So set variable AVSession, going to initialize. And then the next thing we want to do is tell MBS all of these various things that we want. We want to tell it which camera we want to use for this session. We want to tell it where we want the preview window to go, and then we want to actually start the preview. So next step is set variable. Again, R, this is how we give MBS commands. And then the specific function we are calling is going to be AV recorder dot set video device. And then it wants, and again, I'm getting this information from the MBS documentation as far as exactly what it wants. So there's the function name. After that, I'm going to do a semicolon, and it wants to know first what session it is. So we've already created a session and stored it in a variable. So it's going to be AV session. And then the last thing it wants to know is what our selected camera or AV device is. So I'm going to do that again here, and that'll be AV selected device. And you can put some spaces in here if you want, just to make it a little bit easier to read. So again, I'm calling the AV recorder set video device function, telling it in the session that we just started, I want this device that we selected before. Great. Then the next thing we're going to do another set variable. And again, it's going to be a local variable of R to give MBS instructions. And this one is going to say MBS, the function name is AV recorder. And what you might notice with these plugins installed is that your script editor has become very colorful, which is great. And you'll notice with this MBS that this text on my screen is currently red because I haven't typed in a valid function name yet. It's a great little error check as you're going. But it's avrecorder.add preview to window. And you notice it turned blue because it's, oh, this is a working thing. And then it wants a little bit more information. It wants to know what session we're talking about. So AV session. Then it wants to know what window we want to put it in. And of course, we named this window the cam preview. So I'm going to say cam preview. And then it wants some dimensions. It wants, crap, what are the first two? I don't remember what the first two are. I have zeros in my demo. I have to look at the functions for that. Let's do this for now, and then I'll go back and figure out why. And then finally, the width and the height of the preview window. This is where those earlier variables we defined becomes important. We have width first, and then after that, we have height. The reason now you see why we defined these things earlier is because I can define them in this very first step, and then once they're defined as variables, I can change things quickly. So now instead of having to update several different lines of scripting, I can update just this first one with a different size, and then it will persist throughout everything. So looking at this one more time, because this is a bit more complicated. Add preview to window, AV session, cam preview, 0, 0, width, height. I don't remember what these were. They're other dimensions, and if you have the MBS documentation open, you can find out what they are. But you get the idea for now. And then there's one more step. I want to do one more variable. And this again will be an R, instructions to MBS. And this is the one that will actually start that preview. So it's MBS AV recorder dot start preview. And then before we close the parentheses, it wants to know what session to start the preview from. And that's of course going to be AV session. Simple as that. So that is my start preview script. I'm going to go ahead and open up my data viewer one more time here. Great. Yep. That looks right. And I'm going to add a button that says start preview. So I'm just going to go bloop, copy paste this one, double click, change this over to start preview. I could add a little icon to it with a camera if I wanted to, but I don't feel like doing that. Start preview. Okay, so now I'm going to make sure that my FaceTime camera is set. See, set to 0. I'm going to click start preview. And it worked. There's me. You can see here's the window that I made, and this is where you're going to want to play around with a little bit with what devices you have, what size the window is going to be, what size your preview is going to be, etc., etc. But that's basically as simple as it is. Now, if you're using a Mac and you're using your FaceTime camera with this window open, I want you to close this window and then look up at your camera and notice something right away. The little green light on your camera is still on, right? Even though it's not actively sending a video to anywhere, FileMaker and MBS are still using that camera source. So it's using up system resources, and it can cause issues for you later on. So if we come back over here to our demo solution, let me close the data view again, you'll notice that there's this important shutdown script right here, right? It's this little line right here that we really care about, this MBS AV recorder release. So similar to, I guess, what was it, on an expression console, you have a release function, right? It's going to release this session. We're not using any more release the devices. We're also going to add one more little thing in there that will close the preview. And I'll show you how to do that right now. So we're going to create a new script. After start preview, we're going to call this one stop preview. And the steps are as follows. First thing we're going to do is do the set variable again. We'll say R. This will be another MBS function. This function name is, we're going to close the preview first. So it's AV recorder dot close preview. And then after that, it wants to know what session. I forgot what, oh, AV session, that's right. So there's that one. And now just for speed, I'm going to copy paste that one. My next step is going to be, instead of AV Recorder close preview, we're going to use that AV Recorder release and leave this AV session there. So now it's going to close the preview and it's going to release the current session. So it's say we're not using this anymore, you know, release this back into the wild. And now the thing I want to do, I could play this, and you notice probably right away your camera light turned off. Nothing really happened on our screen, but if you're using a Mac, your little camera thing turned off. And I want to automate this a little bit, so when I close that preview window, it's going to run that script every time. So in order to do that, I'm going to go over to that camera preview layout. I'm going to edit it, Command L, and then under Layout Setup, I'm going to go to Script Triggers, and I'm going to say on, where is it? On Layout Exit, run stop preview script. So now you see it shows up here at the bottom corner. Now when I close this window, it's automatically going to close the session and stop the preview so that I don't have to worry about that anymore. So to test it, let's go back over to AV Devices. Got 0 here, our camera. Open up our data viewer here just to be safe. Good, so device is still 0. I'm going to start a preview. There it is. And you might have noticed it started a new session here as well. We probably should clear out this AV session whenever we close the preview, but you know, do it if you want. Now when I close it, can't see this on your screen, but of course my little camera in use went away. Great. So now we've got the preview started and stopped. What is next? I guess next would be capturing the actual photo, right? Let me check my list here. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to leave this AV Devices layout the way it is. I'm going to come over to my one of the very first layouts we ever made, which was my Focus Assistant. And really, you want to be on anywhere that you have instrument focus photos is where you want to be. So I don't think we actually dropped any photos in, but if you remember correctly, in looking at this particular table, we have a single container field that was focus photo. That's what we care about. So if you haven't done the earlier sessions, you could just create a quick little layout for yourself with or a new table with a container field and a couple of text fields. But we're going to be using this Focus Assistant that we made before. So on my photo layout, I'm going to make myself a nice little button that says Capture Photo. Maybe we'll have some fun. Maybe I'll put a little camera icon next to it for the heck of it. There, that's fun, right? Of course, that button doesn't do anything yet, but we're getting there. And then the next thing we want to do is go ahead and create the script that this button will use to drop the photo into our container. Now, looking back at our demo here again, we see this is a single line. So again, we could actually make this this right here be a single, instead of writing a completely separate script, we could actually just link that directly to this button. I think that's what we'll do for now. So instead of saying link it to a script, I'm going to say link it to a single step. And now let's look at it right here. It is set field. Set field. And now the field that we want to set, specifying a target field, is going to be whatever the container field for your photo is. So on mine, I called it focus photo. Whatever you happen to name it, that's what you want to choose there. Whatever the container field is goes there. And then you're going to calculate a result. And that is going to be MBS. Function name is AV Recorder. Capture still photo. And then it's going to ask you, from what session do you want to capture that photo? And of course, that was what? That was AV session. Great. Click OK. Great, let's test it. Let's go back into browse mode, photos, capture photo. Uh-oh, an error. Why did that error happen? The error happened because we hadn't actually started a new camera session. Remember before, we released the session, we suspended our camera preview. Now, it did still have this in here. I left this in here on purpose. You know, in our close preview script, we should probably clear this variable out, but either way, it's going to give us an error. Right now, it's saying invalid reference number, the 53007, and if you look at this session number that we last used was 53007, but MBS knows that that session is no longer active, so it's giving me an error. It would probably give me a slightly different error if I didn't have anything in this variable. So either way, same similar issues. I'm going to close my demo for now so that I can make this a little bit clearer. I'm going to leave this window open. I'm going to open a new window by going Window New. And I'm going to go over to my AV devices. I'm going to start a preview. And now click Capture Photo. And look at that. It dropped the photo right in because I had initialized a new session and I had an active camera device going. So this is where I say having this preview window open is super helpful because it helps you keep track of if your camera is active and if it's not. Now, of course, you might be saying, okay, well, now once I'm in this layout, I don't want to have to sit there and go back to my other layout and turn a camera on and do all that stuff. Couldn't I make this button smart enough to prompt me to do all that stuff automatically? Answer is yes, of course. So I'm going to close my preview window for now. And of course, now if I capture it again, it's going to give me an error again, and you see there's a new session number. So I want to make this this button this a little bit smarter, which means, unfortunately, this can no longer be a single step thing. The cool part about what FileMaker makes available to us is it knows that this probably will happen. And so they've given us a little button here at the bottom that says Convert to Script. So I'm going to click that button. I'm going to give it a new name called Capture Photo. And I'm just going to save it. I'm not going to edit it there. And then when I come back into my script editor, you'll see at the bottom it's made a new folder called Scripts for Buttons, and it's dropped that in there. I'm going to, of course, move it up into my AV Capture Scripts folder. I'm going to delete the Script for Button folder because I don't need it. And now that single line that we typed before is still a single line, but it's available to us. To add more things to. Okay, so now what I need to figure out is I need to figure out a way to determine if there is currently an active session. So there's a couple ways we could do this. We could clear out that AVSession variable, kind of like I did before, or like I was talking about before. And so then we could make a check that says if this variable is empty, then do this, or if it's got a number in it, then do this. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to make us a new global variable that basically is just a true-false global variable to let us know if we are currently in a camera session or not. The reason I'm going to do that is because later on down the road, it could become more powerful for us to be able to just have that variable in a really quick way. We say, yes, this is active. No, it's not. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to want to do is back over here in my start preview script, I'm going to add one last step, and I'm going to call this a global variable AVSession active. And I'm going to just give it a value of true. So now when I start a preview, AVSession active is going to be true. I'm going to copy that, and under stop preview here, I'm just going to make that change to false. Okay. True, false. So simple as that. Now, when I come back over here and I click start preview, you'll notice there I am again. I have to be ready when that turns on. I'm never quite, I always forget that I'm about to be seen. I have this AVSession active. And of course, it's not going to say true or false. It's going to be a Boolean 1 or 0. So true is 1, false is 0. And now when I close the window, it changed to 0 because it's now false. So now, back in my script editor again, under this capture photo script, I can start I can use that 1 or 0 in an if-then statement to figure out if I should go ahead and do this or not. So I'm going to leave it up there for now. We'll move it in a second. We're going to say if AVSession active, we'll say, let's do the not first. Does not equal true, or you could say is false. Depends on how your mind works, I guess. Else. So we know right away, okay, anything between this and the else is going to happen if we're not currently in a session. And anything after the else would happen if we are in a session. So I'm going to move this set field down here. Great. And now I need to decide what I want to do if I'm not currently in a session. Probably the easiest thing would be to show a dialog box to alert me to that and say, and I could say yes or cancel. I'm going to leave this commit data on the first one here checked. Yep. So it's basically, it's going to pop up a box that says, hey, wait a second, there's no current video session. Would you like to start a new one? Okay. And then I'm going to add a kind of a nested if statement in here. So if get last message choice equals 1, and where I got that from again is because this, so default, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. So if the last message choice by the user is 1, oops, then I want to open a new window, and I want that window to go to my AV devices layout, where I can then, of course, click the Start Preview button, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you might say, okay, well, couldn't I just have it, say, call the Start Preview script instead? Yes, you could. The reason I like doing it this way is because it makes me double check that I have the right camera device selected, and it makes it a more purposeful action. So I'm going to save that, and I think that's all it needs. Great. So let's try it really quick. I'm going to make sure that this is linked. Yep, it's linked to the right thing. So now when I go to Photos, Capture Photo, there is no current video session. Would you like to start a new one? Yes. Did it open? I guess I need to close. Let me close this window first to make sure it actually, it did work. There it is. It worked. So it opened that new window. It just didn't offset it at all, which you can specify in that new window settings, obviously. So now I can come in here. I can say Start Preview. I was trying to do a funny face for you, and then it ruined it. And now I can capture photo, and it's going to drop the photo in. Great. So you get the idea. I'm going to go ahead and close that preview. We'll test it one more time. Capture photo. Look, there's no current video session. Would you like to start a new one? And of course, if you click cancel, it won't do anything. Now, what you might be thinking is, okay, as we examine these scripts a little bit, couldn't I add something, where is that, this initialization? Couldn't I do this on my capture photo script? Couldn't I just have it, do some of these things in the background automatically without having to open that preview window? The answer is, of course, yes and no. You could do it, but the challenge there is that every time you click that script, it's going to then initialize a new session. And it's just going to lag a little. It's going to cause some lag. If you're talking about doing 400 photos at once, why have that extra step in there that's going to cause your system to lag a little bit? And then number two, again, and this is a personal preference of mine, I like to know exactly what is going on. I want to know, okay, my preview window is open. That means I'm currently capturing photos. And so being able to do that, I think, is super powerful. And again, you could make this, instead of this script, what was it doing, going back to this layout here, I could instead just say Start Preview, because again, I've already specified a camera device before, et cetera, et cetera. You could maybe even get a little more complicated. You say if AVSession active is not true, and or a device is not selected, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. Okay. Let's see here. Anything else that we need to look at today? I was trying to keep this to an hour, and I did a pretty decent job, I think. Try it one more time here. Too many windows. Try it with the cam link, see how that looks. Oh, whoops. Start preview. little bit better, 4K picture. And it's pretty instant. Like you can watch on the left here, I try to throw my arm up and it doesn't get, like, it's the minute you click that video, click that picture, it pretty much works. Great. Okay, so that I believe, let's see. Yeah, that I believe is all for today. So next week, we're going to be looking at how to annotate this image. So this is pretty cool already, right? We can quickly capture an image pretty easily. You know, I could turn that light on, point my camera at the stage, click capture photo. I'm going to experiment a little bit with doing multiples, so I could have a focus photo and then maybe like a screen capture of the augmented point of view or something like that. Oh, questions here. Sorry about that. Yeah, and I think Andy is correct about that device ID thing. I think it does remain consistent, but I will experiment. Joel asked, every time you capture a picture, does it delete the one you took before? Yes. So what it's doing, if you look at this right here, it's basically dropping that photo into that container field. The container field, unless you have repetitions, which we're not going to get into in these sessions at all, the container field holds a single piece of media or document, right? So whenever I run the script, it's dropping it into that container. Now, if you wanted to have multiple photos, you would basically just need multiple container fields. So in my solution, for example, well, I'm not going to try to open it live here, but in my solution, I have 3 photo fields. And so then I just have a separate script that runs. I have one, you basically specify I want to be an A, B, or C, and then it'll run and drop the image into whatever particular field you want. Other question here, are the pictures stored in FileMaker or just on the computer? The pictures in this case are only stored in the FileMaker containers. Now, let me go ahead and talk about next week. So next week, we're going to look at annotations of images. And so basically what that means is, in addition to just dropping this photo into this container, I can also annotate over top of it with the channel number, the show logo, the purpose, the color, all that, any information that we have here, we can overlay on top of this photo. And you might be thinking, okay, well, that's cool, but couldn't I just do that on a layout? You know, I've got this picture here. Couldn't I just put the fields on top of it? Yes, of course you could do that. But what we're also going to look at is how to automatically export those folders to, export those containers to your hard drive. So you could, as you capture these photos, have an actual folder full of the various annotated images, which could be super useful if you, let's say you want to import them into EOS for some reason. Super important if you want to do documentation on groups, stuff like that, which of course we're not getting into quite yet. Eventually I do want to do group capture and all those other kinds of things. But at least for now, that's what we'll be doing. So yes, Joel, to answer your question, we will be doing how to get those images out of FileMaker and onto your computer as part of next week's session. And again, we'll be using the Graphics Magic plugins from MBS for those purposes. Great. So I think that's it for today. If you have any other questions, feel free to throw them out in the chat and I will stick around for another couple minutes. Otherwise, I will see you all again next week. Next week again is image annotation. 2 weeks from now, we're going to be doing automatic image capture, where you click a single button, your EOS turns the light on, it takes a photo, your EOS turns the light off, moves to the next one, and goes all the way through your rig doing that. So look forward to that. Great. Thank you, everybody. I will be hanging out in the chat if you need anything for a couple minutes. Otherwise, reach out on Instagram, and I'll see you soon.